Hello, everybody. This is Ben from Benbegone.com. I'm going to go ahead and start off with our very first podcast. And I'm super excited to go ahead and get this started. If you checked out my previous one, just kind of going over the basics of it, that's great. If not, go ahead and check it out and kind of get a little bit of a feel for what I'm hoping to make this podcast. So like I said, I'm really excited to go ahead and get this started. I have with me today somebody that I've been getting to know over the course of about a year. She goes to my same school, and we are in the improv club together, which is a lot of fun. Hopefully we can go ahead and maybe have somebody on to talk about that in a little bit. But so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right. Well, hi. My name's Kara Marin, but Kara. I'm 19 years old. I'll be turning 20 pretty soon. I'm a sophomore here at the University of South Florida. My major is international studies, and I'm minoring in linguistics, and I'm hoping to soon make that a double major in international studies and applied linguistics. I know Ben through improv, so that's pretty cool. That's me.
Okay, great. So that's basically what we're going to be hoping to hit on today, is especially linguistics. I just thought that this would be an excellent topic to go ahead and start off the whole podcast with. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of people, obviously they use it every single day of their lives, but I don't think a lot of people would really think about it too much. And even I didn't even think about it, if I'm being frank, before really talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about. So.
Oh yeah, linguistics it's one of those things kind of like psychology, except people know a lot more about psychology, where it's something that you do every day, whether you know about it or not, but most people kind of a lot of people don't even know that it's a subject, for one thing. One of the common misconceptions with linguistics is the study of language. It's the study of all language, how language works, blah, blah, blah. So usually when I tell people that I study linguistics, they'll be like, oh, what languages do you know? And it's well, no.
Wrong.
Linguistics is the study of all language and how it works. You don't actually have to know more than one language to study linguistics. Most people who are in linguistics will, of course, study more language, because if you're in linguistics, you probably are interested in language, so it makes sense for you to want to study more languages and stuff. But you can study about a language in terms of linguistics without knowing that language, and kind of just like how you can learn a language without knowing the linguistics of that language. It's,
definitely.
Of course, everybody, as long as you know a language, which, everybody pretty much knows a language. Yeah. I'm pretty sure, actually, I was in a class that we talked a lot about first language acquisition, and I'm pretty sure we kind of was if a child is exposed to language, they will learn it. It will happen.
Just kind of like a process, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just kind of if a child is exposed to a language, be it two languages or one language, be it sign language, whatever, they will learn language, no matter what. If you know anything, if you talk every day, if you write, if you whatever, then you know something about linguistics.
Absolutely.
Honestly. Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me to be kind of like something that's highly unconscious, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just something there in the back of your mind that you don't even, at least for me, for somebody who really doesn't understand much about it, it just seems to me like such a fundamental aspect of how I would live my life, even though I might not even recognize it. And to be honest, I really did not up until coming to college. So I mean, that's something that really went ahead and surprised me when I came up and started talking to people who knew what they were talking about. I mean, really, it's just what a bizarre thing.
Yeah.
But so I just want to go ahead and ask you a question. What made you interested in linguistics? How did you go ahead and get into the field in general?
So when I came into school, I knew that I liked learning about foreign cultures. I thought that language was pretty cool and whatever, blah, blah, blah. So when I looked at what should I study, international studies kind of stood out, because it was it's studying international things. And I was great, cool. So I went into that, and it wasn't entirely what I was expecting, but I still love international studies. I do love learning about other countries and stuff like that. Yeah. But I was kind of one of the things that I really liked was learning languages. I've learned Spanish all my life. My father's Puerto Rican. I didn't grow up speaking Spanish, but I grew up around it. So when I learned it, it was much easier to kind of comprehend, which is a thing called heritage learners, by the way. But that's some linguistic terminology, whatever.
Sure.
But so I kind of got in, and I was I like language. I think it's interesting. I, listen to music in different languages. I
That's
listen
incredible.
to like Spanish music.
Yeah.
I listen to Korean music. I listen to all kinds of things. I just think language is so cool. Communication is so cool. And I've always kind of really just thought that communication in general was interesting. I mean, when I was in high school and stuff, I really loved like rom-coms and all that stuff. And a big thing in that is that there's always a problem, and it's usually because there's some kind of misunderstanding or some kind of miscommunication.
Yeah.
And I've always been like, if people would just talk to each other, gosh. And
Yeah.
so I've just always thought language was so cool. And I remember my first year here, I was talking to one of my mom's friends who was, she had studied linguistics.
Sure.
And she was kind of like, oh, like, you sound like you would like it. Like, maybe you should take a class. And I was like, well, we'll see. So I took Intro to Linguistics, and oh my God, I fell in love.
Really?
I got into the class, and, there were all these people that were just like me around me. Like, all these people who were like, yeah, I want to learn cool languages. And gosh, I think communication is so cool. And just all
definitely.
these great things. And I remember my teacher, her name was Judith Bridges. She was really cool. She was who I want to be. Like, she was like, oh, I love language, and she knows French, and like she studies all these like linguistic things. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, I was just so in. I remember we kind of like outlined all the things that we were going to be talking about.
Right,
all the
yeah.
different kind of topics. And I was like, oh, like some of this sounds a little stupid. Like, for example, when we said, oh, we're going to go over phonetics, I was like, oh, phonetics sounds. Whatever, that'll be like the part that I don't like about this. But then we got into it, and now it's my favorite thing. Like,
That's
every single thing that we did, everything we talked about was so interesting and so fun. And I was just like, wow, like, I would sit there in this class taking tests, and I would be like, wow, I'm just having such a great time, like, woo, circling answers, like, I know so much. So I was kind of like, I realized that, I mean, when you have fun, like so much fun, and like everything that you do, nothing is a chore, I guess that's kind of like, I was like, wow, maybe this is like something I should continue on with. So, now I'm totally in. I'm so ready. I can't wait. I'm considering like going to graduate school and stuff for linguistics and stuff. Like, it's so great. I love it.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that is really cool. I mean, the whole point of this is to go ahead and find people and just talk to them about stuff that they're deeply passionate about, and that I might not even know as much about anything. I mean, really, coming into this, I'm like, man, I really don't know anything about linguistics. So I was like struggling all day to like think of, good questions to go ahead and like help facilitate the conversation. But yeah, so you went ahead and mentioned that you were an international studies major, and with a minor in linguistics.
Yes.
So your interest kind of stemmed from like an international perspective? Is that how you would say? I
mean, like, before I really knew what linguistics was, I knew that I liked languages, and I went into international studies with kind of this idea of, I want to interpret, I want to be like what the job kind of description that I found that I was most interested with was a guide interpreter, which is basically like a tour guide / interpreter for people visiting other countries.
Oh,
and
cool.
I was like, I want to do that. I was like, I want to study languages. I want to learn all kinds of languages and stuff. And international studies, I mean, like, is a really good, like, you learn about different cultures through that. You learn about, like, politics of other places and stuff. It's a really good kind of, like, what you make of it as well. Like, you can choose a certain region to focus on in that major. So it seemed like what I was going for, but then it didn't have as much emphasis on, I guess, the part that I was really interested in.
Yeah, of course.
Before I knew what linguistics was, I was kind of like, well, I just kind of want to, like, learn a lot of languages. And, I want to, like, know more about languages. And I got into linguistics, and I kind of found that, like, that field, the study of language itself, as opposed to just learning languages, was I really was interested in. I just didn't really know what it was yet. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. So you went ahead and mentioned that some of the different areas of the world that you were interested in, I think, a moment ago, and you mentioned like Puerto Rico and Korea. Are there certain like areas of the planet, I guess, so to speak, that you would be interested in studying more with linguistics? Like certain, I don't know the right phrasing for this, but I think like maybe different areas, like different languages. Do they differ as much? I guess that's a question.
Yeah, it's so interesting because languages have so much in common and so many differences at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, we talk about things that, like, every single language kind of, like, shares, and, like, all the kinds of things. But then we also, like, see how different they are. So I don't know if I have a certain region per se, or, like, language itself that I am more interested in learning the linguistics of, just because you can kind of touch on everything just by studying linguistics.
Okay.
But I know that for international studies, like I'm kind of my kind of focus in that is kind of like Spanish and Latin America because that's what the classes that I've been taking. But linguistics wise, no, I want to learn everything.
Yeah, no, it seems like you're really interested. Man, that's wild. Do you, do you happen to have like an example of maybe some differences between like say English and Spanish? Like as far as linguistics is concerned?
Yeah, I mean one of the ones. So I'm currently taking a class that focuses a lot on phonetics.
Sure.
And recently we've been talking about kind of like stress and stress patterns and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually something that English really differs from almost everything on. In that the way that we kind of have our stress in phrases is like so different from the way that everybody else does stress in phrases. Where
sure.
We kind of like I'm trying to think of how to explain this. It's kind of like the way that we kind of like we stress certain words and certain concepts and things. Like if you were going to talk, I think the example that we most recently had was like the sentence "cats chase mice," which is 3 words, and every single one is stressed because every single word is kind of important to that concept.
Right.
But then if you were to add more words into that, you would kind of like the cats have been chasing the mice. The words that are stressed are still cats, chase, and mice. Like
okay.
or parts, I guess, because you add ing, but you still are going to stress chase out of chasing. And,
right.
So that's kind of like we tend to stress like things like that. Where so the phrase "cats chase mice" and "the cats have been chasing the mice" have the exact same rhythm, even though one has way more words than the other one, and that's because we kind of stress the words that are important and kind of gloss over all the other ones.
Right.
Where cats chase mice. The cats have been chasing the mice. We have taken the and have been chasing and like have been, and we're just kind of like pushing them together and making them really quick and like putting them somewhere else because that's not what's important in our kind of stress patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in other languages, stress is more based on like syllables, and stress can be based on like other kinds of things that are more about like the rhythm of the sentence as opposed to like what words do I want to hear and what words don't I want to hear kind of thing. So it makes it awful for people who are trying to learn English because we
sure.
take these words and we kind of like throw them out and we make them quick and we just kind of push them aside. But yeah, it's really interesting to see how that kind of works, especially like when you compare it to like languages like Japanese or Korean that are very like equal stress, like stress is divided over like for syllables and stuff, like each part of the word has the same amount of stress kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
It's really crazy to see how different a word and the stress is over there versus us who like stress one thing and throw another thing completely away, and like really there's like such an unbalance, and it's really interesting. But yeah, that would kind of be, I guess, to answer your question in a very long way.
No, that's great. I mean, so I guess my next question would be, do we associate, I guess, more meaning with certain things than with the stress, obviously in English? But say, for example, do we carry more weight with our words over here with English rather than say like Korean? I mean,
I wouldn't think so. No,
okay.
Not exactly. Yeah, because like stress is kind of associated with different things in different languages and stuff. Whereas we associate it on like what we view or like what we kind of want to like push forward in a sentence. So like there's the kind of like the natural stress of a sentence where just like if you're talking, there are certain words that are naturally more important, such as like the nouns and the verbs, as opposed to like the and like your little stuff. But we also use stress a lot to like emphasize things. So like we kind of break our natural stress pattern when we want something to be more important. Like you will see those examples of sentences that are like, she took the money from him, where if you say it like she took the money from him, you're implying like, oh, she did it. Or if you're like, she took the money from him, and it's kind of like, oh,
different
there's someone
meanings,
else.
Yeah.
She took the money from him. She took the money specifically. She took the money from him. She took it. She didn't borrow it. Like that kind of thing. Whereas in other languages, stress is used for different things. Like stress can be used to, I know like in some languages it can be used to make the meaning of a word completely different.
Right.
It can be used, sometimes it's more of a rhythmic thing. It really just depends. So yeah, words when it comes to like having connotations and holding more weight, that's more of kind of something that evolves like culturally and kind of through society, as opposed to like usually stress.
Probably depends on the speaker more.
Yeah, that too.
Okay.
It also depends on the listener when it comes to connotations and stuff like that.
So to kind of get back into this, there was one question I was looking to ask, and that is, are there ways in which people use language that they might not be aware of? We kind of hit on like stresses in the words and like that.
Oh, there's all kinds of things.
Yeah,
I'll tell
please.
Because, when you're sitting in a linguistics class and you're learning about it, it's so interesting because, like, as opposed to, like, sitting in a class and learning the history of China or something where you're learning about things that happen.
Sure.
You're learning about, like, things that you do every single day.
Right.
Things that you say, things that you do all, like, it's so interesting. And, there are so many moments I feel when I'm sitting in that class that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I had no idea, and I do that, like, I'm doing that right now. Like, how could I not? So I guess the best example that I can think of right now, probably because we just actually went over this in the class I'm in a class that's called Sound Systems of English, or American English, and, like, how to, like, teach it. I mean, like, the official title is, like, Sound System of American English, and then, like, the class kind of focuses on, like, learning what that sound system is, and then also kind of, like, how would you teach somebody who might have learned English and is struggling with their own pronunciation, like, how would you maybe teach them, and, like what the sounds of this language are,
right.
kind of thing.
Okay.
So one of the things that we talked about, and this is a big thing in phonetics, is this thing called supersegmentals.
Mm-hmm.
So you can break down you can break down phonetics into, like, segmental stuff and then supersegmental, where segmental is kind of like stuff that happens for just one sound. Like if you were to talk about, like, we have something called minimal pairs, which is like changing one sound in a word and it becomes a different word, like
right.
ship and sheep.
Okay.
Id, e, ship, sheep.
Okay, I see.
So, like, that's kind of something that's just segmental because it's just one sound. And supersegmentals is things that kind of happen over more than one sound. We have a bunch of things in this, like linking and blending and trimming, which are all things that kind of, like, segmental stuff is, important to know about, but, like, it's kind of more like what the sounds are, and then, like, supersegmental stuff is kind of like when we're actually talking, what do we do?
Right.
I guess, because you can, like, describe, like, oh, this word, like, or this phrase, the sounds in it are this, but when we're actually talking, we might not say it that way. So, for example, I actually just had a quiz, and we were given a sentence that was just like, what'd you do last Friday? Or the sentence is, what did you do last Friday? And we were like, write it out as the actual sounds that are, like, in this phrase. What did you do last Friday? So we had to, like, transcribe it to IPA, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet.
Okay.
Basically the alphabet that represents the sounds as opposed to just, like, letters and spelling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, if you translate something to IPA, you're saying how it would sound if someone were to say it, kind of thing.
Fair enough. Okay.
So, yeah, so we did that.
Right.
We translated it there, and then it was like, now translate it how somebody might actually say it if they were using it in conversation.
Sure.
So the sentence is, what did you do last Friday? But you would probably say something more like, what'd you do last Friday?
Right.
Like, so, there are places where you drop sounds and where you kind of, like, put two together and all that stuff, and that's kind of what supersegmentals are.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that, people do every single day, and you don't think about it because when you're talking, well, for one thing, you're usually doing it without even, like, thinking. You just talk because you know the language yourself so well.
Sure.
But if you were to stop and think about, like, what words did I use, you would probably be like, oh, like, I just said what words you use, and you would think, like, what words did you use? But that's not how I said it.
Right.
I said it, much faster. There was stress going on. There were certain words that I put more emphasis on than others.
Right,
I probably left out some of those sounds. I did all kinds of fun things. And that's kind of what supersegmentals are. So I guess an example of a supersegmental, if you just want to talk about maybe one of the ones that, because we talked about some of the ones that you're going to come into, like, most often.
Sure.
And the one that I thought was the most interesting is something called blending, which is basically when two words next to each other, or sometimes in the middle of a word it can happen, basically two sounds, you pronounce them as, like, you combine them together and you pronounce them as a different sound. So, for example, if you were to say to someone, what you doing? You are saying what, well, technically, I guess that's not maybe, or if you're to say, like, what you want, like, what and you next to each other, as opposed to saying what you want, or, like, what do you want, or whatever. I mean, first you would kind of get rid of that middle word because you're putting what you in together, and then, like, you're, as opposed to saying what you are, like, kind of making a ch sound in the middle, so, like, what ch kind of thing.
Right.
I actually have an example here because I have all my stuff out. We took actually a thing from the movie The Matrix, like a little paragraph, a little monologue that is in there, and we put in it like what are the possible supersegmentals and like what might the actor actually say when he's saying it.
Okay.
And one of the phrases is, I know that you are afraid. And like word for word, that's I know that you are afraid. But if you kind of say it, maybe were to say it more naturally, you'd probably say, I know that you're afraid.
Okay.
So you have blending with that and you, where you say, I know that chew, like I know that chew.
Okay.
So there's like a CH kind of sound coming in there.
Right.
And then, oh, sorry, I thought someone happened there. And then like you have some other stuff going on there, like linking with are and afraid, where linking is like you say two words almost together as though they're one word. Like are afraid, as opposed to are afraid, you kind of go are afraid.
So if I could just interject here for a second, it seems like a lot of this is just totally unconscious. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the main theme.
You have no idea that you're doing it, yeah.
I mean, really. So how does this stuff sort of like evolve over time? I mean, it must take so long. I mean, I can only imagine, I've been doing this since I can ever remember. And just to think of, separating the words and the sounds into what they actually are, it seems like such a departure from what, if I were to write it, rather if I were to say it out loud in a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is that when you learn your first language, or like, as a child learning language for the first time kind of thing, if you compare it to how a lot of people think about learning a second language, it's very like you don't, one thing, you don't have a language at all to base anything off of. You're just kind of learning how to communicate. So it's like you are learning based on like what's going on and like what the people around you are doing and stuff like that. So the kind of linking or I say linking, but that's just one. The kind of supersegmentals and the kind of way that you talk is based on kind of like the influences you have around you. Like, how did your parents talk? Maybe where are you from? What are the people around there like? What kind of friends did you have?
Right.
Kind of the thing where you notice if you start hanging out with one person often, all of a sudden you might say some of the words that they say or talk a little bit more like them, because your own language is kind of like you have like your own kind of way that you develop through all of this stuff, but like you take in the things that are around you. So your own language changes a lot over time. I know that I talk very different than I used to when I was in high school. I use all these different words that I have learned from like my friends around me, and I'm pretty sure I pronounce some of the things differently based on just who I'm around. Especially because I'm not in my house anymore, so some of the things that my mom might say, I come home and I'm like, oh, geez, I haven't heard that word in a long time, or like,
right.
I wouldn't say that because I'm not there anymore right now, so like language kind of changes all the time, and it's very like we kind of like take and feed off of like the people around us.
Such a subtle way too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh man.
One of the actually interesting, haha, that's not grammar. Linguistically, it's fine. One of the interesting things actually that I like to kind of talk about with people, because it's something that, this is kind of one of the linguistic things that people notice, but they don't really know what it is. They're not entirely sure like how to, like they're like, oh, this just happens, and it's like, yes, there's an explanation for that.
Oh, okay.
One of those kinds of things. Linguistics and psychology just like work so well together. It's anytime I think of it, I'm like, it's kind of like in psychology.
Yeah.
I don't know that much about psychology, but I have friends who do, and they're always like, wow, that's a lot like psychology, and I'm like, I know. But like, kind of one of the things where if you were to go to a different country, and you might start kind of like taking up their accent and stuff, people kind of notice that, like, there are some people that are more susceptible to that. Like, I know I personally am someone who is very susceptible to just kind of like taking in language. Like, if I were to go to another country, I'd probably come back talking like really different.
Really?
And when I make new friends, I take on to like saying the words that they say very easily. Like, I kind of just like suck that stuff up. And there are other people who don't suck it up as easily. Like, they are kind of more like they give out stuff, I guess you could say, because they might go to another country and come back talking the exact same, because it's just not at all. So it's kind of interesting because there are people out there who like me, like they just take it in. Like, oh my gosh, like I start hanging out with someone and a week later I'm already saying I'm saying a word that they use, or I'm like using the kind of like things that they do. It's easiest to notice in vocabulary because, for example, we have a mutual friend, Jace, and Jace says frickin' all the time. And the more you hang out with Jace, the more you start to notice that you use the word frickin'.
That's right. Wow.
People notice it in vocabulary all the time because it's pretty easy to be like, hey, like, I say that word, or wait, don't you say that word? But there are other things that, as I've been learning more about this kind of like supersegmentals and stress and stuff, that I've noticed I also do. For example, Clinton, another mutual friend of ours, Clinton, the way that he sometimes talks and the way that he like makes jokes. I've noticed that every once in a while when I go to say something, I will say it kind of similar to how he does. And that's probably just, I've been I hang out with them all the time and stuff. So like,
does this apply also to like cadence, like how they, I guess the speed at which they talk, and sometimes the way that they present words? Like I got a friend that puts a lot of stress at the last word in his sentence every single time. And
interesting.
Does that spread as well? Can you start picking up those kind of speaking
I'm
patterns?
sure you could.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have a friend like that, so I wouldn't know, but I'm sure. I mean,
right.
Like kind of like how I was saying with our friend Clinton. He sometimes the way that he does, the way that he just pronounces things, or when he wants to like say something funny, he'll be like more da da. And I've noticed that like
right.
at first I would be like, oh haha, like that's such a him thing to do.
Right.
And I've noticed that every once in a while when I go to say something, I'll be just like, ah yes, more water, and I'm like, that is not me. That's totally Clinton.
Right.
You know, so really you pick up so much. Like you don't even know. Like I probably wouldn't have even recognized that I do that if I hadn't kind of gone into linguistics, of course,
right.
and known that that's a property of language. That's something that happens. So yeah, we're just sponges. We suck everything up.
That's incredible.
And people think that, oh, it's like once you reach a certain age, it kind of cuts off. You don't do that anymore. And there's, all kinds of kind of like controversy of like, oh, is like, terminal like blah, blah, blah. Is that a thing? Like, is that not? How does that work? But there are definitely things that we know that no matter how old you are, you will probably still. Because, I mean, like, here I am. I'm definitely not a child, and I still will pick up new vocabulary and kind of like take to other people doing things, maybe not as easily as I would be learning a language, but it's still like it's still there kind of thing.
Right, so it's not something that ever goes away, that ability to really pick up what other people are putting down.
I wouldn't think so, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I know like I said before, there are some people who are more susceptible in it than others.
Sure,
but
sure.
You never really know, and I feel like, I don't know if I've actually gone into that in detail in any of my classes or something, but I'm not sure if that's something that's like just kind of like how you are, if that has to do with genetics for some reason, or I don't know. I don't know how that becomes a thing. There might be a way. I don't know it, whatever it is. I'm not an expert on this.
Okay.
I just like it.
Right. So, I mean, the next kind of thing I was thinking we could hit on is obviously, to me, I mean, this seems obvious. I could be totally wrong. The way that you think determines the words that you would use. Is that a fair thing to say?
That is something that I don't really know. Because that sounds like, there's actually, I talk about how linguistics and psychology look like they would just so go well together. There's a branch that's called psycholinguistics, which is literally psychological linguistics. And I'm sure someone from there could tell you, but I do not know. I'm not sure. Wow. I feel like maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, this is something to look further into, I mean.
I don't know a lot about psychology itself, so I feel like, I don't know, you could grab both me and Mark one day, and we can talk about it. He knows psychology, I know linguistics, will be great.
You'll be coming on at some point, I'm sure. But, okay, all right, so let's go ahead and transition now into, like, where you would like to see yourself. I mean, where would you like to take this? Let's say in 5 years, or however many years.
I've been thinking a lot about this lately because I really came into everything kind of being like, I just want to learn every language, and I want to be a tour guide, and I want to interpret for people and stuff.
Sure.
And as I kind of got more into it, I've seen myself maybe more in a setting of TESOL, which is teaching English to speakers of other languages. There are actually different, like, there are all kinds of like abbreviations for things that are of that nature. Like there's like TFL, which is like teaching English as a foreign language, and then there's teaching English as a second language, and then there's teaching English to speakers of other languages, and they all kind of mean slightly different things. But like teaching English abroad kind of thing, or like teaching pronunciation or doing something like that. Last semester, I was in a class that was called a second language acquisition, and we did a bit of linguistic research when it comes to fluency. Okay. So that was really cool. I found myself having a lot of fun, and I've been like, maybe I should go into like try doing some linguistic research and stuff. Like I said, I've been looking into like grad school and like programs for applied linguistics, and stuff like that. So I don't really know. Right now, I'm really starting to lean towards like TESOL. I'm thinking about taking some classes kind of like that, and maybe like furthering my education with kind of that in mind. I've been looking into some internships and stuff that are like, going to like basically kind of teaching English and stuff, but kind of as opposed to like being a teacher and having a class being like, oh, you know, you are going to assist like a teacher, or you're going to assist in like a certain program with like just like smaller things as opposed to like just straight up being a teacher and teaching. But yeah, I really like the idea of teaching English because I mean, English is a language that is every single day becoming more and more global. And I feel like a lot of people, there's such like an interest for a lot of people to learn it. So I feel like that would be a pretty cool field to go into, seeing as, you know, I'm a native speaker. So it might be kind of cool to teach people about like aspects of English that maybe aren't already being talked about in classrooms and stuff. Like, you know, teaching a language with kind of a linguistic spin on it, I feel like would be something really, like we talk about that a lot in our classes where we're just kind of like, oh, like, you know, maybe teaching a foreign language and also acknowledging the linguistics and stuff might be like a way for people to better understand or stuff like that. I mean, so yeah, I don't know. There's a couple kind of things I've kind of taken. I mean, I still every once in a while think about the interpreter thing because I do want to learn a lot of languages.
It's just an interest, huh?
Yeah, I already know English and Spanish, and I started learning Korean my senior year in high school. I've recently been looking into learning maybe German. I'm actually interested in an internship where you need to be fluent in English, Spanish, and then either French or German. So that's why I was kind of looking at German or thinking about like French or something like that. There was a time where I started kind of looking into Swedish, and I kind of put it off because I ended up having to like, you know, do schoolwork and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, I just kind of like language is just so interesting, and I'd love to do that. And being an interpreter sounds, you know, I came in with this whole idea where I was like, oh, like I want to be an interpreter because have you ever thought about like all the people out there that you could, you know, maybe be totally cool friends with, or all these people that you could meet, or all these like things that you could do, but you don't because you can't communicate with them. You don't know their language. You don't know like what to say to them, blah, blah, blah. Like maybe there are people who like want to go to a country, but they're reserved because they're like, but I really want to go see China, but I don't know what to do because I can't speak Mandarin or anything like that, or, you know, stuff like that. And I was kind of like, I want to be like a part of the kind of force that bridges that gap, that like helps bring people together, like interpret for like, you know, help people see other cultures and stuff like that. I mean, translation and interpreting is already such a big part of my life because, you know, I watch a lot of like dramas from other countries, like Korean dramas and Taiwanese dramas, and I've watched telenovelas and I've watched so much stuff, and, you know, you're like, I won't know what's going on. Well, telenovelas is another story, but like with other things, I'd be like, I won't know what's going on without the subtitles. And, you know, there's so much cool stuff out there that like, if it's in a different language or in a language you don't understand, you're kind of like, well, what do I do? Because I can't do anything with this. So that idea of like taking something and like making it so that it's accessible for people who couldn't read the original language or couldn't speak or whatever was really like my big thing. But I guess as I've gotten more into it, I've thought about like, well, what about like actually teaching people that language, or, you know, doing other stuff.
What about like humanitarian stuff? Have you ever thought about that?
What do you mean?
Like, you know, sometimes I've known people to go to, say, Japan, for example, and they'd go and they teach. Maybe Japan's not a good example, but I've known people that have gone to different countries and they go and they teach kids, young children, English in different languages, just to help them, I guess, get a foothold in the international community, so to speak. Yeah. Would that be something that you might be interested in?
That falls right into TESOL.
Oh, great. Well, I mean,
yeah, definitely. That'd be cool.
Now, you also went ahead and mentioned that English is, you know, continually becoming a global thing now. Why is that? Why is English, of all languages?
I don't know.
Yeah?
I mean, I'm sure that there's a reason behind it. I'm sure there's some history you can follow, talk about, like, I don't know, the politics of it and the blah, blah, blah of it. I don't really know. I know in linguistics we always talk about where people, you know, because, you know, this is where we are right now and we kind of know English as such a global language, we're just kind of like, oh, like everybody needs to learn English and stuff. But, you know, 10 years, 20 years, however many, the global language could be something completely different. Like, it just kind of depends on what's going on in the world. I don't really know why it's English. I'm sure that there's all kinds of reasons for it. I guess that's not really my field. I guess I could say that's not, I don't know a lot about it. But I do know that, I guess, so this is kind of going off of a tangent of kind of what you say, but one of the things that I always kind of find interesting is if you ever go and you like take, like, I don't know, you have some kind of a question of, like, oh, like, what's the most spoken language in the world? Or, like, what language has, like, blah, blah, blah. Usually you'll get, like, an answer that, like, Mandarin is the most, like, spoken, blah, blah, blah. Or, like, it's something else. And that's usually because there's a difference between, like, the amount of native speakers the language has and the amount of actual speakers it has. Where, like, I'm pretty sure the language with, I don't know for sure, but I really want to say that the language with, like, the most native speakers would be Mandarin.
Okay.
Because
like
something in me
that.
feels like that's correct. I'm not sure. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But and English is definitely not. That's kind of where I was getting to, is that English is not the language with the most native speakers. However, it is, I don't know for certain because I don't know all the facts in the world, but it is probably the one with the most speakers, because so many people learn English as a second language, and so many people learn English, second language, I guess, is kind of, because, like, so many people learn English later on in life, or, like, as a second language when they're growing up. Like, there are all kinds of countries where you, like, the U.S. is, we're a very monolingual kind of place. And that probably has a lot to do with the fact that English is such a global language that we're like, well, we don't need another one. So we're a very monolingual kind of society and culture where most people here grow up with English, and that's kind of it. But there are all kinds of places where you learn more than one language, be it just like places where, oh, yes, you just learn English from, forever because it's a language that you're going to need later on. Or there are places where it's like, oh, we have, like, the national language, and then there's also, like, a language for, like, our specific area and stuff like that, where that happens to people. But English is just kind of like, one of the articles that I actually read pretty recently for my class is something called, I don't know if I'm going to be pronouncing this correct, but this is the way that I feel like it should be pronounced, and that's probably the
Close
Spanish
enough,
in me. Yeah. Is English as a lingua franca? Lingua franca?
Oh, yeah, lingua franca. Yeah.
And that's basically a lingua franca, or however that is actually pronounced. Sorry if it's wrong. Basically is a language where two people who know different languages, who speak, basically, like, one person who might speak Spanish and English, and another person who speaks French and English, and their first language would be French and Spanish respectively. They also know English, however, so they would communicate in English. It's like that kind of, like, bridge between that. English is used as that all the time. There are plenty of people that, they go to another country and they assume that someone's going to be able to speak English and stuff like that.
So that's kind of the norm then.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that English itself, the English as a lingua franca, is kind of like evolving into its own kind of thing, because when you encounter so many speakers of different backgrounds, like different linguistic backgrounds and stuff, speaking this one language, you're kind of like producing all these new things within it, like new, like, pronunciation kind of things and, like, new stuff like that. So it's really interesting how big English is. Like, it's bigger than sometimes we think, because when we think of the amount of speakers, we usually are automatically like the amount of native speakers, like how many people grew up speaking English. And it's like, oh, there's tons more people who learned it. Maybe they learned it in school. Maybe they learned it after they were 30 and they were like, suddenly I need to know English, like, whatever.
Right. Maybe out of necessity for business or whatever.
Yeah, stuff like that.
That's wild.
It's one of those, if you think about it, usually when you go somewhere, you kind of expect that someone somewhere is going to know English. And, that's kind of the language that it's become. But it might not stay that way. It probably won't stay that way forever, but that's where we are now.
Yeah, actually, that leads perfectly into the next question I was thinking of. Could you see, like, another language, could you foresee, say, Spanish, for example, taking over, or any other language for that matter?
I personally, like, I don't know enough about a certain language and kind of, like, the culture and, like, the politics and, like I was saying before,
Sure.
I don't know enough about all that stuff surrounding any certain language that makes it look like this is, like, the new upcoming language. But, if it happens, and it probably will, because it's not going to stay one way forever. Language evolves and changes every single day.
Yeah.
It won't be really a surprise. Like, if all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, people need to know Spanish now, it's not going to be a one-day thing. It's going to be slowly and stuff. But once we kind of realize, it'll probably be like, well, yeah, pretty much.
I remember in, elementary and junior high and then high school, man, they were just pushing for everybody's got to take Spanish, or everybody should, at least try and learn another language. And I really struggled with.
Yeah. Spanish is a big one here because, we have a lot of, like, we have a lot of Spanish speakers.
Right, yeah.
Like, there are plenty of places in America, like cities or areas where, like, if you want to get a job there, being bilingual is almost, like, necessary.
Absolutely.
Like, just like places where the population of Spanish speakers is so high that it's like, well, if you want to do something there, you're going to have to be able to communicate with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I know they push Spanish here really big because of that. Because we have a very large population of Spanish speakers here, for many reasons. Like, I mean, my dad is here from Puerto Rico. He came here for school. He came here for college.
Yeah.
So, like, there's that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of Spanish here. So, I mean, it makes sense that we would push that one pretty big.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I'm just gonna segue into this topic a little bit, and I know I might not have mentioned this in my introductory video that I put out a few days ago, but I was kind of wondering, like, with each guest that I bring on, kind of talking about what they would hope to accomplish with their life, and what their dreams, their aspirations could be. And part of this is me just trying to learn a little bit more about the people that I talk to and the world that I live in. So, are there certain things, are there certain, concepts or ideals that you'd hope to aspire to, or like, are there certain accomplishments that you'd like to try and reach for?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, none of them are anywhere too specific because,
Sure.
We're definitely in the stage of our lives where we're like, what am I doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I know I personally, I've mentioned I want to learn a lot of languages. I
Right.
would like, I mean, I don't have a set number, but I feel like a good goal for right now is like 5.
Oh, man.
Because I already have 2 and I'm like in the midst of I've been working on a 3rd one for a while and I've just kind of now started a 4th. So like if I can be fluent in 5 languages by, a good time, I mean, definitely not like anytime soon because language takes a very long time to master. But I would like to be able to communicate with a wide variety of people. So learning a lot of languages is one thing I definitely want to do. I really want to, I say it sounds so like wanderlust in this way, but I want to see the world.
Right.
But I do. I want to travel to a lot of different countries. I was kind of like, I feel like when I talk about it, I'm kind of like, I want to experience the world and all that it has to offer and meet all kinds of people that I wouldn't be able to if I stayed here. This summer I'm actually going on a study abroad program in Spain. So yeah, I'll be in Spain. I'll be, taking classes in Spain and stuff. And I'm very excited for that because I have never been to Spain.
Get to kind of experience a whole nother world.
Oh my gosh,
really.
I can't wait to go to Spain. I mean, for one thing, I've studied Spanish for so long, and like Spanish is a really big part of me, being like Puerto Rican and stuff like that.
Right.
But I'm very excited because because all the kind of like Spanish that I know about and a lot of the things that I've studied when it comes to Hispanic culture are all like Latin America kind of things. Like I know a lot about Puerto Rican, of course, from my dad, and I'm in a class right now that's like Latin American studies where we talk about like things kind of going on in South America and in like Central America and stuff like that. But Spain is kind of like a completely different thing.
Oh yeah.
The way that they, I mean, for one thing, they're like kind of like versions because there's obviously more than one, kind of like dialects and stuff of Spanish are so different, and they're over in Europe, so like a lot of their cultural things are very different. It's just kind of like I just can't wait to kind of like see what it is, because I feel like I know so much about like kind of this side of the world's Spanish, but I've never I don't know a lot about Spain, and I really can't wait to like be there and see like what is going on and actually like live there for 6 weeks.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be really cool. But I mean, there are all kinds of places that I would really like to go, because I've never been to any country in Asia, and I feel like that's like an entire part of the world that I've never seen, and I really want to like, see all of that. I've been to a couple countries in Europe. It was when I was very young though, so I definitely want to revisit now that I kind of am like old enough to maybe appreciate what's going on more. Because when I was in 2nd grade, I'm pretty sure, right? It was 2nd grade. Yeah. Just about 2nd grade, so I was very young. There was like a high school program. I'm pretty sure it was like an AP European history class or whatever.
Something like that.
Yeah, they were raising money so that they could go on like an educational tour of Europe. And my mom knew the teacher, and she was kind of like, oh, well, if you know you need any chaperones, like, hit me up. And the teacher was like, oh, yeah, that would actually be great because, like, she had a daughter who was my age, and she was like, that way, you know, our daughters could, like, hang out with each other, because she was like, I can't leave my daughter at home, and, you know, if your daughter comes and helps out with the fundraising, of course she can come along. So, yeah, it was great. I was actually, like, doing car washes with, like, all these high school students, and, like, I was kind of, like, the little, like, you know, there's a high school student being like, please donate money, and people would be like, nah, but then they'd see, like, the second grader, like, please, and they'd be like, oh my god, so cute. So I was great for that. But, yeah, I got to go all through Italy and, like, experience places in Spain. I went to Amsterdam. You know, I went on this whole tour, and I mean, I was only in second grade, so I was kind of like, whoa, Europe, this is so cool. And I mean, I have a lot of cool pictures from back then, but, you know, oh gosh, they're like, I feel like there were things that were going on that I just, like, if I were to go now, I'd be like, oh my god, whereas at the time I was kind of like, whatever. Like we went to, for example, we went to the Louvre, and I remember kind of being like, I'm bored. But now if I were to go to the Louvre, I would probably be like, wow, because I've, like, taken humanities classes, and I, like, know more about kind of art and stuff like that. And so, like, there's a bit more of an appreciation, I guess, I would have, as opposed to when I was in second grade and I had Heelys, and I was like, wow, the ramps are fun, and, like, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something definitely lost at a younger age, especially when you try to experience new things. I just think that's not going to happen with the young children, but especially now, I mean, you know, I would love to go see different parts of the world. At least for me, I'd like to go see, you know, some place like Ireland or Australia for something. Those are just two bizarre. Those are just two random examples of, like, what I would like to see. But could you see yourself living in a different country? Like,
that'd be cool. Yeah. I mean, every time I think about it, I always think about, like, myself, like, going from place to place, and, like, I feel like when I talk to people about the future, they're kind of like, oh, but, like, what about settling down? Like, do you want to, like, live in a certain country, or, like, do you want to come back here? And, like, in the back of my mind, I'm always like, what if I just don't settle down? What if I just keep going? Like, I never stop. Like, I mean, I feel like there's enough of the world for me to never have to stop. But, you know, I guess, like, that kind of idea of, like, staying one place and being in that one place, just kind of like, oh, I can't even imagine it right now, because, like, there's just so much, and I'm like, I can't, like, stop. I have to just keep going. So, I guess if I were to, you know, stay somewhere, I mean, I could see myself maybe living in, like, another country, as opposed to just, like, coming back here and, like, doing
America,
something. Yeah. Like, if I were to settle down somewhere, I'm sure that I would be fine doing that in somewhere cool. Well, I say somewhere cool, but that's because I'm from here and not from there.
Right,
But, like, yeah, that'd be awesome. But, I mean, like, right now, my mind is so in this set of, like, I want to, like, travel the world that, you know, when people are like, but what about, like, sitting down and starting a family? I'm like, what? Hold on. I have to run everywhere first. Wait. So, yeah, maybe I'll just never settle down. Maybe I'll just keep going. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future. I mean, I don't want to plan too far ahead, because what if I want to do all the cool stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, for me, it seems to be that so many people, you know, obviously they grow bored with where they live.
Yeah.
You know, and so they would want to go, you know, say live in Spain or Ireland or Australia or one of those other places. But man, just to have that experience of going somewhere else and, and really experiencing just living there.
Yeah.
You know? Man, what a wild experience that would have to be.
Yeah, because I feel like, there's such a difference between, like, going and visiting somewhere for a week and, like, actually, like, living there for a year, I guess. So, yeah.
I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, I just, I'm not fortunate enough to know what it's like to be well integrated, so to speak, in another country. But man, what a journey that would be, really. But yeah, so what a great conversation so far.
Cool.
We hit on a wide variety of topics. I mean, linguistics, you know, who you are and what you would like to do.
You got a little bit of me. You got how old I am and, like, what I study.
Well, then there you go.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks, everybody, for listening. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. Please feel free to check out the website, and hopefully we'll have more of these coming out soon.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Everybody have a good day.